And today we're in Proverbs. Proverbs may be my favorite book of the Bible. It is certainly the one I have read the most. The theme of Proverbs is practical wisdom. And you ask, well, why have you read Proverbs the most? Because it has 31 chapters, and years ago, I was just in a really difficult spot. Everything in my life was upside down, and I just needed some guidance. And I heard someone say there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. If you'll read one a day, it can be transformative. And every month you'll read through it. So I started, and for probably 7 or 8 years, every day I read a chapter in Proverbs. And I would read it in a different translation often. And so like it just kind of sunk in with me. And so I've spent a lot of time reading in the book of Proverbs. And last week I received this gift in a little gathering at the Franklin Graham Crusade, and it's called Words of Wisdom, but it is a Psalm and Proverb devotional. So you read Psalms every day and Proverbs every day, and it's one that Billy Graham did. Billy Graham would read the Psalms and the Proverbs every day, and he said that the Psalms were to tell you how to get along with God, and the Proverbs were to tell you how to get along with one another. And that if you could learn how to get along with God, the praise, the worship, the understanding, and you could learn how to get along with one another, that it would be transformative to your life. And so I would say that about the book of Proverbs. You know, the book of Proverbs is not, I don't want to say it's overly spiritual because, you know, there's not a lot of prophecy in it. There's not a lot of pointing to Jesus in the book of Proverbs in general. There's just not a lot of those things. It's short sayings that if you put them to practice and use them in your life, that you can make something happen. It just so happened that we ended up on Proverbs on Mother's Day. Because one of the difficult things about special days is trying to preach something like you hadn't preached before, you know, because everybody preaches kind of the same themes on special days. But we typically are in a series, so we preach whatever's in front of us, and it don't always lend itself. But we were in the book of Proverbs, so I got to choose whatever I wanted to preach out of the book of Proverbs. And so Proverbs 31 is one of the most famous, you know, chapters in all of the Bible that talks about women and wives and mothers. And so it is a proverb not written by Solomon. So the last couple of chapters in the book of Proverbs are not written by Solomon. Most of the others are attributed to Solomon. And so verses 10 through 31 are the ones that we most know in chapter 31 of Proverbs. We know most of that. And this is Lemuel, 10 through 31, talking about his wife, who is also a mother, okay? So that's what that is. But verses 1 through 9 are Lemuel's mother talking to him and giving him some specific pieces of advice. So today, that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about advice from a mother. I started to name this Advice Fit for a King because it is a mother whose son is going to become king, and she's sharing with him some specific things, 3 specific things that I think are important. As a matter of fact, I believe there's not a single mother in this room that would not give this same advice. I just believe every mother in this room would give this same advice. And so today I want to tackle it. Now, mothers love to give advice. Right? Yeah. Some of y'all are scared to nod your head, yes. Mothers do. Mothers love to give advice. My mom she loved to give advice. And there were things over my life that I remember her telling me, and I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. One, I didn't appreciate at that moment. I'll explain that to you. And the other one has benefited me even if I hated it. So I'm going to ask my wife I didn't tell her I was going to do this. I need you to come to the stage again. Yeah, this won't take you long. You're going to be on stage 4 times a day. What about that? With your fascinator. She never knows what's coming. So she's scared to death. So I went skating I was probably about 12 years old with this girl named Sheila White. And I was enamored with Sheila. Now, so you know she wasn't as enamored with me. She wasn't that enamored with me. But she agreed to go skating, roller skating with me. We had a roller skating rink. I don't know if I need to explain this to young kids or not. We had a roller skating rink in Wilmington. That's where we lived at the time. So I was about 12, and this is what my mom said to me before I go. These are her instructions to me before I go. She said, if you put your arm around her, she said, you can put your arm right here, or you can put your hand right here. She said, do not drape your arm over her shoulder, and do not put your hand under her arm. Now, see, right, now you can go. I could have picked one of y'all random to do that with, but that'd been kind of weird, and I won't choosing Bob. Here, let me explain that to you, because some of you know why she was telling me this at 12. Where I needed to put my hands. But I was so sheltered, I had no clue what she was telling me. I just thought there was some kind of etiquette, like this is where you put your hand or this is where you put your hand. I had no idea, and I had no desire to put my hand in somebody's armpit. You know, it didn't register with me. The funny thing about it is I was probably in my 20s. And one day I had my arm around somebody and thought, oh, that's what my mama was talking about. Right? I was just clueless. It was just one of those things. That's one piece of advice I remember my mom giving me. The other piece of advice was, I was young. When I say I was young, because now when I grew up in church, you wore a suit and tie every Sunday. Every Sunday. Okay? Every Sunday. All right? Every Sunday. Sunday night too, most of the time. That's all I ever knew, you know. And so she taught me, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, how to iron my clothes. Like how to iron a dress shirt, you know, how to put it, and she stood there with me. And I learned how to tie a tie when I was like 7. So, you know, I know kids now that are in their 20s have no clue how to tie a tie. But I learned how to tie a tie when I was like 7 years old because I hated the clip-on ties. And so anyway, she taught me how to iron, and I hated it. And I've never met a single person in my life that said, oh, I love to iron. Nobody. I mean, you might be good at it. You might know you got to do it. You might not complain about it. I ain't never met the person who said, whoo, boy, I'm tired of hanging out with y'all. I need to get home and do some ironing because I miss it. You know, I just ain't met that person, you know. But over my life, it has made me presentable and respectable and professional in some environments that had she not taught me that, I may not would have paid attention. And so there are so many things, and I suspect as I've sat here and talked to you, maybe it's something your mom taught you. Like I specifically remember the first thing I learned to cook was corned beef hash. That's weird, but it's the first thing I learned to cook. But mom was very intentional about teaching us those things as a young person. And I suspect as I've talked, you've thought about some things your mom taught you or some advice they gave you. And some of it is probably things that you're like, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You know, like, and there are things that you do now that you swore you'd never do. Right? The one I remember the most is my mom, because boys, we'd get in our suit and tie, but we were going to play. We'd play football, whatever until church time. And then we'd go in smelly, dirty, sweaty. And if I got stuff on my face, right? See, some of you are snickering. And she'd wipe my face off. And all the rest of the day, all I could smell was mama's spit on my cheek. And I swore when I had kids, I would never do that. Did anybody else swear you would never do something like that? Yes, I swore I'd never do it. And I remember the first time Cameron come running in the room, and he had something on his face, and I needed him to be presentable. And I did that, and as soon as I touched his face, I said, oh, I'm my mama. It just happens. You know, some of the things they do, we swore off, but we do them. Some of the things that maybe the advice they gave us was in their limited understanding or their abilities or their knowledge at that time. And it's understandable that you take some of it and you leave some of it. But today I'm going to pass on to you some motherly advice that is fit for a king that I think all of us can benefit from. And here's the first one. Choose your relationships wisely. I do not know of a mother that has not had some conversation with her children about the relationships that they have in their life. This is a common conversation that happens. And if you're in here and you're a kid and you're like, my mom is always telling me that I need to be careful about the people that I hang out with, you are in good company, because every mother on the planet has done that. You know, at some point they've said you need to be careful, you need to watch out, you need to pay attention, you need to guard yourself against that person. And you know, there's plenty of studies, there's plenty of psychology about this, there's plenty of writing about this. You become who you hang around. The people that you spend the most amount of time with, they are going to rub off on you. That's why we talk about discipleship happens in the context of relationship. You can't become a disciple of Jesus Christ solo. It's impossible. But in the context of relationship or other people who are trying to become like Christ, you are molded and shaped into who you need to be. And that's why you as parents have so much influence on your children and the people that they're with. And it says this, the sayings of King Lemuel contain this message which his mother taught him. O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows, do not waste your strength on women, on those who ruin kings. Now, I first want to say I don't believe that he is saying that his mom said all women are bad. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think she's trying to tell him, because later he's going to write what a good wife will look like or should look like. The 10 through 31, he's telling us what this woman looks like. That is a Proverbs 31 woman. But here she warns him, don't waste your strength on women, on the kind that ruin kings. Wrong relationships are wasteful. If you're in the wrong relationship with people, if you're in a relationship with the wrong people, you're going to find it to be wasteful. It wastes your time, it wastes your energy, it wastes your integrity, it wastes your money. And as helpful as some relationships are, other relationships are just as destructive. And you have to be able to discern the difference between the two. And sometimes we can't. Sometimes we don't see this. Listen, I don't believe God has assigned me to everybody. I got to speak to everybody. I got to be kind to everybody. I got to love everybody. But I don't have to let everybody in here. I don't have to do it. And there's no requirement in Scripture that I have to let everybody in here. The people that get in this circle need to have some characteristics that are important in my life. They need to have some characteristics that help improve, that sharpen me, that make me better, that point me in the right direction. You have to be wise in choosing the people that you allow close to you in your life. His mother is warning him that there are some relationships that can ruin you. Have you ever seen a group of kids and you remove one out of a group of four? One. And it either gets significantly worse or significantly better. That's the difference somebody can make. One. It's about character as much as anything. And he says, you need to be careful that you don't join yourself, okay, to people who are going to ruin your life. Second thing, avoid destructive vices. I grew up in a teetotal household. And it was teetotal everything, not just teetotal drinking. If you wanted to know if you could do it, the default answer was no. Now, some, like, for example, alcohol. Some of it was the church's teaching that I was a part of that had a bearing on that. Some of it was my mom's experience. So her dad was an alcoholic, her brother was an alcoholic, and she would tell stories about her mom working third shift and her dad coming home and passing out drunk in the ditch, and she would go out and get his wallet and his keys and lock herself as a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl in the house all night because she didn't want somebody to have keys to be able to come in and get her. So it wasn't just our church's teaching, okay? It was also her personal experience. Now, as I've gotten older, I see this a little bit different. However, I think what we have to understand is that the Bible, okay, I don't have time to talk about this today in too much depth, but the Bible doesn't forbid drinking alcohol. It always forbids drunkenness, 100% of the time. Never is that okay. So it doesn't forbid drinking, but it does tell us we should never, I'll put it there, be drunk. And there's really no compromise around that. And one of the reasons why is we have to be careful about the vices that lock into our life. Vices are dangerous. This one happens just to talk about alcohol, but I'm going to talk about a few more because I feel like I need to be fair and have a conversation about it. It says, "It is not for kings, O Lemuel, to guzzle wine. Rulers should not crave alcohol, for if they drink, they may forget the law and not give justice to the oppressed. Alcohol is for the dying, and wine is for those in bitter distress." So even this verse gives some permission, okay? Even this verse gives some permission. Bitter distress and dying. It says, "Let them drink to forget their poverty and remember their troubles no more. But as for you, this is not a good practice." Because it says you might forget your purpose. One of the most important purposes of the king was to remember the law and give justice to people who were oppressed. That was one of the most important things the king could do, to make decrees and laws that protected the people. And if he was drunk, he might forget how to deal with it. He might forget how to apply it. He may let some things get by him. And what she's trying to tell him is that don't let anything distract you and cause you to forget what is most important. This is where I want to get into this a little bit. You see, vices, not practices, vices distract us from our purpose. And anything that distracts you from your purpose is dangerous. It doesn't matter what it is. And there are so many vices today. Gambling, food. Come on now, I remember one time as a kid listening to this guy preach. He was about 400 pounds. And his clothes were so tight that if he had moved the wrong way, he would have poked the eyes out of everybody on the front row because his buttons would have gone just like that. And he was telling the room, he was talking about smoking, cigarettes. It's a whole different issue. Your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you shouldn't put things in it that are going to endanger your body. And I was sitting there thinking, like a Krispy Kreme, that's just how I evaluated what he was saying. You know what I'm saying? And he never addressed the fact, okay, that he struggled with that. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I grew up as food is my comfort. We didn't have a lot of money. We were broke. But that was our comfort. We didn't have fancy cars. We lived in a parsonage. My mom and dad never lived in a house they owned until they retired. We lived in a parsonage. I didn't have fancy clothes. I wore Bobo tennis shoes and hated them, and tough skin jeans, and you couldn't wear a hole in them. You couldn't tear them so you could get something new. It's just you just wore them, and we didn't have a lot of money. Food was our comfort. It still is. My parents are 79 and 76, or 77, and it's still comfort for them today. If you went to their house, you would see where most of their money goes. It goes in food, and when they go to eat, it's food. And I grew up that way, and it's the thing for me that is the most difficult. And we don't think anything about it. But it can become a vice. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the food. One, because I suspect some of y'all in the same boat I'm in. Right? I can't exercise enough to keep my elbow from feeding my face. But some other vices are things like retail therapy. Come on now. See, y'all thought I was going to talk about porn and sex and alcohol and drugs. That ain't most of y'all's problem. It's some of you's problem. Okay? But there are a lot of things that become vices in our life. And when we get stressed, that's our default. We go eat. We go shop. We eat sugar. We smoke weed. We drink alcohol, right? The vices distract us. They take our mind. That's what it says that it does. Vices make us forget how difficult things are right now. Social media is a vice. Sugar's a vice. As a matter of fact, the three things overwhelmingly that people want to quit in the United States this year are alcohol, smoking, and porn. That's the top three by far. If anything is distracting you from your purpose, it's a destructive vice. Last thing. You mothers need to get with me here, because I think I'm delivering this message how you would deliver it to your kids, except maybe the food. Because you want them to go to your house today and eat that big meal and eat that cake you made. Last thing. Speak up for those in need. This is an important verse just to our church. You would see it on our cafes merchandise, the Brew to Rescue. You would see it for our Restore Hope ministry that works to help fight human trafficking. This verse is going to be on those things. Concern for others is a critical skill for mothers to help their children develop. If we're not careful, we will raise, and I'm just warning you, like I don't have the gloves off yet, but I feel like if we're not careful, we are raising some of the most selfish people. Because we're not teaching them to think about the people on either side of them, in front of them, and behind them. We only get them to think about themselves because they think the world revolves around them, and we've created that. It says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice. Everyone does not have the same voice you have. Everyone, when they speak, doesn't get the attention you get. Some people don't have the understanding, the ability, the knowledge, the courage to speak up, and you have to be their voice. You have to be the one that speaks up on their behalf. You have to be the one that says something for them. You see, your voice may be the hope someone else needs. and you keeping silent because you're like, you've got it figured out, or it's not your problem, or you think what they've done is self-inflicted, is damaging. He says, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Ensure, and listen, we just dedicated babies. Babies and children typically don't have a lot of voice in congregations like this. And so our obligation is to speak up for them, to make sure that we are helping them, providing for them, giving them the structure that they need in the house of God to be able to thrive and to flourish. It says, ensure justice for those that are being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and the helpless, and see that they get justice. Like this verse is so important. I would tell you a way you can speak up. I'm going to give you a very practical way. Okay, so we have a team of 12 that are going to Moldova in July, and we sponsor the kids, the orphans. Some of them will be Ukrainian orphans, and some of them will be orphans from homes, orphanages in the country of Moldova. Our team will be ministering them. It costs $125 a kid to put them in that camp. We want to put 150 kids in there. You could give $125 or $1,100. I can't do the math right this minute. $1,250, is that right? Yeah, $1,250 and sponsor 10 of them. You can do that. That's a way that you can speak up. You may never go to Moldova, but you can make sure that kid gets to a camp and is placed in an environment where they're loved and cared for and ministered to, and somebody speaks into their life. He says we're to speak up for people who are poor. We're to speak up for people who are helpless. We're to make sure that they get justice. We should not just use our influence to benefit ourselves and our own well-being. We have to. Listen, and we've got to raise generations that do this. We have to raise generations that speak up for other people, that are concerned about those who are behind them, that those who haven't figured it out, those who are less fortunate. We cannot keep believing that we are the center of the universe and nobody else matters. We're not. And my voice on this stage matters, and what I say matters, and I have to speak up for those who are less fortunate, those who are helpless, those who are poor. It's an obligation on my part. I can't keep silent. We have to think about other people. Speak up for those who are in need. I don't believe there's a single mother in this room who would not tell your children these very three things. Choose your relationships wisely. Avoid vices that are destructive. And speak up for people who are in need.